Hello all, thanks a lot for joining this first CEPR Media Plurality webinar. We already had like a webinar together like a couple of months ago, but it was co-organized by the Research Policy Network on media competition. And so this is really the first one that we have focusing on media plurality. So first of all, I want to thank all the participants that accepted to join this event, and in particular, of course, the members of the network. I see like some of them now entering in the room, like Andrei Simonov, Anya Schifrin, Charles Angelucci, Thomas Valletti, all the members of the networks that provide research on media plurality, and without them, we won't have the existence of this network. So thanks a lot. And thanks to all the people that just decide to attend. We saw like a lot of people from academia, but also a number of like policymakers. And this makes a lot of sense for us because one of the goals of this network is to have like good research produced that can inform policymakers about what can be done to protect media plurality. And for us, it was very, very important today to begin this webinar series by tackling an issue that is key today at the European Commission level, the issue of media plurality, and in particular to talk about the European Media Freedom Act. For that, I really want to thank our two guests who accepted to come and present their work and present the media the European Media Freedom Act, which is not so easy because we have a version of the act, but at the same time, the act is still under discussion. And so we also hope that, in a sense, the discussion we will have after your presentation will also help inform a little bit the European Commission about what could be done in terms of like next step. And we are sure that it will help also to inform ourselves as researchers, both in terms of what kind of research we should do in the future of this topic, on this topic, to be sure to be useful, but also in terms of perhaps how we should evaluate in the future the European Media Freedom Act and its different dimensions. So thank you very much to Marie Frenay, who is a member of the cabinet of the Vice-President Vera Jourova, and that works in particular on all the issues on values and transparency at the European Commission. It's really great to have you, and thanks also a lot to Anna Herold, which is the head of the Audiovisual and Media Policy unit at the European Commission. We are very lucky to have the two of you today. So if it works for you, we will begin by a presentation by Marie Frenay first. Then after the presentation, if you have like some questions, we can have like small discussions, but the idea is really to have, after this first presentation, another presentation by Anna Herold, and then to open up to questions. We have 1 hour and a half together, so we have like plenty of times. So thanks a lot, and thanks again in particular to Marie and Anna for making it today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julia, and thank you to all the participants. Well, I can only confirm that your work is very important for us, and that it is really informing what we are doing in the European Commission together with Anna. And actually, when we started this mandate, so it was in 2019 with Vice-President Jourova, we really started by using the Media Pluralism Monitor. And I think that, I mean, there are researchers working on this now in the call. And so thank you very much for this work, because now it has really been embedded into our rule of law report, which is our annual exercise that we are doing to analyze the media landscape across the European Union. And it's really building on the work of researchers. And actually, we started the mandate with some strong evidence, thanks to you. And so it is also on this basis that we decided to analyze how we would address the different issues that we could see in the research work and in analysis on media freedom and pluralism in the European Union. And what we could see directly is that, unfortunately, the situation was not good. And so we saw a deterioration of media pluralism and media freedom in the European Union, journalists being murdered, attacked, pressure on public service media, the issue of concentration, for example, the case of KESMA in Hungary, the allocation of state advertising. So we could start this political mandate with all these problems on the table, and there was a strong political will to address them, which in the past, I mean, has not always been the case, because there is the question of competence, and I think we will get back to this during our conversation. But there has always been a bit this message from the Commission saying, okay, media freedom, pluralism, this is for member states to deal with, not so much at EU level. And we really wanted with Anna and with Vice-President Jourova and also Commissioner Breton to challenge this idea and to say, okay, there are problems, and now it's really a European issue. We have to address this at European level. And so we started a kind of mapping and trying to see which tools at EU level we could use to address the issues. And a very urgent issue was, of course, the safety of journalists. So quite early, we decided to issue recommendations to member states to improve the protection of journalists. And actually, by the end of this year, we should have a report also from researchers as well involved, from an independent also report on how these recommendations have been implemented in member states. And also, we decided to propose proposals or legislation against abusive litigation, so the so-called SLAP. So we proposed a directive against abusive litigation, which is now also being discussed by the European Parliament and the member states, and we hope also to get an agreement as soon as possible. And then when we presented, let's say, our roadmap in 2020, the European Democracy Action Plan, we also had a list of issues where we needed a bit more work to see how we would address them. So if you look at the European Democracy Action Plan that we presented in 2020, we already had some, let's say, the seeds of what is today the Media Freedom Act. So we were already mentioning the issues of how can we support self-regulation, how can we address issues related to concentration, transparency of ownership, cooperation among the regulators. So we had all these topics that we wanted to address one way or the other. And so we understood quite quickly with Anna that we would need legislation and that we needed a strong legislation, but it was really, we needed to do some convincing with the member states. I think that it's, for example, no secret that, for example, in Germany, where you have a strong role of the regions, of the Länder when it comes to media, it was difficult to see that there would be a law on media freedom at the EU level. And so we had to also do a lot of legal work, us internally, to explain that actually there is a competence of the EU, because today you have actually a single market, because media are now cross-border. You can really access media cross-border, and there are a lot of issues also in terms of investment in the media sector, which are cross-border issues, and so it makes sense for the EU to regulate. And so we did, and here, I mean, I think we have a slide on this, if it's possible to show it, to show a bit the timeline of all this, where we did what we do when we do a regulation is consultation, impact assessment, and so last year we came with a proposal, and Anna will describe the legislation. And now, so we had the way it works now is that we have a position of the member state, so the council text, the negotiating mandate that was agreed in June. So the member states agreed on their position on the Media Freedom Act, and next week. So this webinar is very timely because next week on the 3rd of October there should be the vote in the European Parliament, and they will vote on their position, and then we will sit all together, the Commission, the member states, and the European Parliament. We will sit together to find an agreement on a final text. And so that's a bit for, let's say, I would say the process around the Media Freedom Act. And now Anna will get into the substance. And of course, after, we are very happy to further discuss the text and any other question you would have.
Yes, so thank you. So if we can go to the next slide, I am pretty sure that most of you are quite well acquainted already with the Commission's proposal, but just for the sake of for the sake of reminding ourselves what have we managed to propose, I like to think about this regulation as having these 5 big building blocks that, if you want, are somehow glued together, because they're quite heterogeneous if you look at the substance of the provisions, by the creation or an upgrade, if you want, of our network of media regulation that regulators that become a European Board for Media Service, so an independent advisory body, to help in the implementation, enforcement of most of the provisions of this new act. So what are these building blocks? The first is something which is, in a way, a prerequisite, if you want, for any media outlet to do its job properly, which is the conditions to do their work without interference in their freedom, be it from the state, but also from the owners. That one of the mostly debated provisions in the Act has been indeed a provision encouraging, if you want, only, but still a legal provision encouraging media service providers to have systems in place to ensure independence of editorial decisions within media companies, so independence from the owners. And of course, specific provisions also for one important part of the landscape that has been subject now to serious attacks. And here I talk about state interference for public service media. We also have in that block provisions on media ownership transparency, which, if you want, again, are a corollary, if you want, of being able to make sure that what media provide is indeed independent, and also for us, for the viewers, readers, to know if, you know, who owns the media, who is behind the media content that we are watching or reading. So this is the first very peculiar, if you want, block in this new regulation. Peculiar in a sense, in the sense that it only contains very principle-based provisions, which was intentional, but maybe not the most typical language for a regulation at EU level. Nevertheless, something which is, as I said, fundamental to the whole media framework. An important provision in that block that I still want to say one word, although we will not talk so much about this, I think, in this forum, where I understand you are mostly interested in economic issues, are also the provisions to make sure that journalists can work in peace without interference in confidentiality of the sources. So far for the first fundamental block of the regulation. Then we come to something which is much more operational, but still extremely important for a well-functioning media market, which is effective cooperation between regulators. We have seen, not the least now recently in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine, how important it is that media regulators are able to talk to each other quickly, effectively, and take common decisions across Europe, for example, as regards the so-called Russian media outlets that have been spreading disinformation and war propaganda. So this, it cannot be overemphasized enough how important it is that we equip media regulators with necessary tools, so that media regulation, that of course still is very much a national matter, can also react to cross-border issues quickly. Then we come to something which is, of course, unsurprising for a piece of legislation coming from a commissioner that also deals, and now also the vice president that deals with digital matters, how we can make sure that what we try to achieve, if you want, for the media sector in the offline environment, so principles of integrity and independence, also works online. How to make sure that the integrity of media content is also maintained online. And we know very well that the type of interferences that we can have online are of a different nature, and they stem mostly from content, possible wrongful decisions in content moderation by very, very large online players that we have already regulated in the Digital Services Act. Nevertheless, we thought that there was a small missing piece of a bigger puzzle, and this is what we have done in that digital part of the act. We have also included specific provision on customization of media offer, to address also the increasing trend, if you want, of locking consumers into certain media environment, closed media environments, without the possibility to set their preferences according to their needs. So much for the third block. I will tell you a little more about this issue of integrity of media content in a while. Then we come to another block, which I think we should have probably a longer discussion in this forum, which are the requirements for national media market measures, but also procedures that exist. So this covers, if you want, two types of rules. One, general framework that tries to regulate or tries to inject some specific tools for cases where media market measures are used basically to arbitrarily restrict market access or make live operation of media outlets difficult in other markets. We have seen many of such cases in our practice. This was one of the, if you want, triggers of putting this legislation in place. Although we have jurisprudence of the Court of Justice, the Vivendi case that was very clear in saying that whatever member states do has to be non-discriminatory, justified, and proportionate, we thought that in this particular and very sensitive area as media law, we need to have a mechanism in place to make sure that we can quickly react. Because as you know, the Vivendi case, if you want, it was very nice on paper. So we got a judgment that we thought was the right one. But at the same time, the whole operation has been already, has not come to the effect. Vivendi basically has withdrawn from the Italian market. So this is why we introduced specific mechanism, including this opinions from this newly created Board for Media Services in such cases as some sort of safety net and a reaction possibility for media companies to prevent or try to at least provide some ammunition in ongoing cases of discriminatory measures. In that same block, we also have something which I'm pretty sure will be of a lot of interest to you, which is our attempt to provide the framework for national media pluralism laws. That has been one of the probably most ambitious, legally speaking, tasks, not an easy one. We have tried to provide something which is which provides some value added, obviously, both to the market, because of course this is the primary objective in terms of transparency, and also tools to make sure that again such laws are predictable, that have very clear that are easily understandable, that make their operation also easier across borders, but also providing for mechanisms. And again, here, this newly created Board for Media Services hopefully will be instrumental in making sure, so mechanism to make sure that there is some sort of, if you want, Europeanization of the way at which media market concentrations are looked at national level. We have had traditionally a landscape where we left these media pluralism considerations entirely to the national level. This is acknowledged in the merger regulation, as most of you know very well. And we haven't had any mechanism to talk about these things at EU level. And now what we are introducing, I will come to that, are two things. On the one hand, some sort of peer review between the media regulators when they are looking at these issues, and also the possibility for opinions when things do not work well. Last but not least, we are also looking at allocation of precious resources on the market. And here we thought that we need intervention in two areas. One, Marie has already mentioned, allocation of state advertising. That, of course, is a very particular, if you want, resource. Still, in some markets, especially smaller markets, can be rather decisive. And we have seen this as an instrument, again, of media instrumentalization, media manipulation, and certainly governmental influence. So more transparency in that market seemed a very natural thing to do if we want to have a well-functioning media market in Europe. In that part, we have also dealt with another issue that I will talk a little more in a minute, which is the transparency also in the market for audience measurement. So if we go to the next slide, if you agree, because we have a little bit of time, I'll focus now on three issues, two of which have been subject to a lot of debate, and one, so the one that I have just mentioned, audience measurement, is probably less debated because of a very technical nature. Nevertheless, I think having, so many distinguished economists is probably an area where we certainly in the Commission would appreciate, your input and discussion as to how this area can indeed also be improved. So starting with the most controversial, I think it is fair to say, issue of integrity of media content online. As I already said, despite the fact that the Digital Services Act already obliges platforms to take into account media pluralism and freedom, And of course, it will be looked at when the Commission, now as the enforcer of the DSA, will be looking at what platforms will do in terms of identification and addressing the risks that their platforms might pose and proposing the mitigating measures. We still thought that this general obligation needed a complementary mechanism, so further procedural safeguards at the European level. And this is why we decided to introduce this possibility for let's say this privileged, if you want, for media to be informed when their content is considered by platforms to be suspended, to be informed in advance. So that has been the main value added of this provision as we put it forward on the table. We have also provided a possibility of being treated of complaints by media provider to be treated in a preferential way, and a possibility of a meaningful dialogue in cases of frequent suspension, but also restrictions of media content by those players. Last but not least, a very important issue, since these are fundamental, if you want, issues that we have to debate in European societies, how much private players should or should not, because of course we are asking them to do a lot, for example, in particular on disinformation. So how far these moderation practices should, if you want, impinge on the freedom, on the very much justified freedom of media players to get their content to their consumers online. These issues, of course, have to be discussed, not the least because we know and we are relying on those same players to, for example, as I was saying, fight against disinformation and other types of very problematic content online. So this is why we have also introduced this structured dialogues between platforms, between the media sectors, and of course, very important, also civil society that will be organized by this new board for media services. So much for Article 17. I'm pretty sure that you will have questions, and we will have quite some discussion on this important provision of the Media Freedom Act. On audience measurement, another digital part of the Media Freedom Act, I think it has been a late addition, if you want, when we have been preparing the rules, something which was less of a focus, nevertheless fundamental, if you want, for the economic sustainability of the sector. Because as you know, the information of the viewers, on their audiences, is something which is an integral part of the business model of any media, and especially those that rely on advertising. So this is why we thought that on top of the very generic provisions that we have now in the Digital Markets Act, that of course can help also media players to get information on data of their audiences already, we thought that it is important also to enhance the transparency on the methodologies in which audience measurement is done, and also that for those players that deploy these proprietary audience measurement systems, they should also make available at request detailed information on such methodology. This provision being, if you want something, as I said, not necessarily at the being the main focus of the Commission's action, has been indeed now something that that was discussed very much and very much welcomed by the industry, and there is a feeling that we are getting that what we have proposed might indeed reorient a little bit the development in the market of online audience measurement. And if we go to the last slide, I will still say a few more words on this framework for national media market measures and media concentrations. So I already talked a little bit about all sorts of discriminatory laws or other decisions by regulators and other authorities, or other measures that we have observed and described in quite some detail in our impact assessment when we prepared the initiative. And this is where we introduced this specific framework that can be invoked, of course, by those players. We have also introduced the right to appeal against regulatory measures, specifically spelled out now in the Act. And as I said, we have this possibility of the opinions by the board that can, we think, or at least potentially could, change the course of things in cases of some measures. To give you an example, we have, of course, had informal exchanges at the political, but also at the working level with several media companies that have been, if you want, subject to such discriminatory measures. And we have seen that as soon as there is a, even if it's not non-binding opinion, so I give you examples from the Polish market that I know best. So the opinions of the ombudsman in the Polish market have been extremely useful in some cases, and were taken by the courts in making decisions on such measures. So we think that the opinions of the board, although non-binding in themselves, could have such a similar impact in ongoing cases that, unfortunately, I think we will continue to see in the European market. And last, a few more words on this regime, on this framework that we are trying to put in place for media market concentration. Just to be clear, so that there are no misunderstandings, this is not meant as a European policy against media market concentration. Of course, we know that there are some media market concentrations that may be actually conducive, at least to internal pluralism. But it is, as I said, important that whatever media pluralism there are in place, they are very clear, predictable, make also life easier for media companies that, of course, have to be subject in some cases to several media pluralism laws, so that they are to a certain extent harmonized, and that we also have independent media regulators always either designated as the ones responsible for such assessment at national level, or at least involved in such assessments when they are done, for example, by competition authorities, which is the case in at least in a few member states. And then this two mechanisms at EU level. One, the peer review. So when media regulators are considering such concentrations at national level, we think that it can be extremely beneficial that they exchange views in the board, and maybe can get comments from their peers that may direct them to different solutions. And that at the very end of the process, where this has not worked, where there hasn't been any consultation in the board, or where there wasn't any assessment, because we know of cases where some concentrations were basically exempted from any scrutiny. So competition scrutiny, but of course also media pluralism scrutiny for the so-called national interest reasons, that in those cases, the board can deliver opinions that we think might also have an impact on the market, at least a strong reputational one. So I think that this is what I wanted to say on these three blocks. Of course, I described them all, so I think in the discussions we can discuss all the issues that we have put forward in the proposal. Maybe just the final remark what we have put on the table, as Marie was explaining, is of course now subject to intense or has been already subject to intense discussions both in the Council and in the Parliament. But I think it is also fair to say that the essence of the Commission's proposal has been kept. For obvious reasons, the Council have modulated certain provisions because of the sensitivity issues that Marie was mentioning at the beginning. On the other hand, the European Parliament obviously, in some respects, wants to go further. But I think, again, what we are now seeing, the picture that, that is ahead of us before the trialogue start, is that probably wouldn't have thought that we would be here, discussing with you. It seemed a bit like, fantasy when we started our discussions here within the Commission. I don't know, now 2-3 years ago, but now we are seeing something that might soon indeed take shape, and then of course we will need you even more. We'll need all the researchers community being extremely active and helping us to making sure that these rules will have an effect in practice on the ground. So thanks a lot. I don't know, Julia or who will moderate the debate. We are of course here to answer questions.
I will do so. So thanks a lot to the two of you. It was really fantastic and super interesting, and I am going to open the floor for questions. But before that, I'm going to act as a dictator and ask the first question myself before everyone is going to ask many of them. So I just have a question regarding the Article 17. In fact, more broadly, everything that you said. Anna, when you were talking about Article 17, basically you highlighted the fact that it is hard for you to decide how far you can go in terms of regulation, because there is a little bit of this tension, between regulating the media, because we care, for example, about media pluralism, and the fact that the media outlets are private firms. And so from this point of view, that there are a lot of things we cannot force them to do, in a sense. What I would like to ask you is how do you define, from this point of view, what a media outlet is? And I guess what a news media is, because what you want to regulate is more like news media rather than entertainment media. And I'm asking that because if you look today for one thing that I know very well, French media regulation, all the French media regulation basically use the fact that media outlets they're going to get access to press subsidies or reduce VAT, and this is a way to define them. So in fact, if you apply, for example, for reduced VAT and you ask to be considered as a media, you're going to be considered as a media. But at the European level, there is no such a tool, in the sense that you can use to bargain with the media outlets. So I was wondering whether you would have some official definition. I know that with the DSA and the DMA, the European Commission has been super innovative to define gatekeepers, for example. So whether you will go this way, or whether you will rely on list of media outlets that are established at the national level by different countries.
Julia, do you want us to answer right away, or we're very happy?
No, yes, let's do that.
Maybe this one, yes, because it's a very, it's a very kind of a fundamental issue that we have in the and we've had discussions. You're right that it's not so easy to define media, and also to make sure that the rules that we are creating now capture, if you want, the right players. So what we did were two things. I think we opted for a very general, it is fair to say that we opted for a very general definition of media service providers. Basically, the limit, if you want, being the provision of economic activity. So what we certainly did not want to capture is you and me having blog posts on the net. So that was not our intention, and we've had endless debates, and we even added, if I'm not mistaken, in the text of the article of the definition of media service provider, the notion, or was it of the media service, the notion of being professional, professional media service providers. So making not only the reference to the treaty, the definition of the Treaty of Economic Activity, which is extremely broad, as you know, but also having this notion of professional activity. And then we have also, of course, been acutely aware that what we are putting here in place, especially in terms of, there are not so many, but there are some, I was mentioning in the first block, obligations on media service providers as well in that act. There, at least from the Commission's perspective, the idea was we want to regulate those that are what you would commonly refer to as informational media. So we coined this notion that I think is also a similar notion exists, I think, in if I'm not mistaken, in French law, of news and of media providing news and current affairs. I think in French it's a little bit more elaborate, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a notion that we used in many places of the Act. And interestingly, we thought that it was very interesting in the debates. Member states thought that we should be more ambitious and that we should cover actually all media, also entertainment media. For example, for media ownership, transparency purposes. So this has been an interesting development to note. And then in terms of privileges, so what we are trying to get for the media, I think that it's very difficult. There is this never-ending discussion, what is the role of the media, whether the entertainment factor, is part of it or not. So what we have opted for is to give the privileges, to give the, if you want, the privilege of being able to have access to the methodology of on audience measurement, or the privileges that we are giving in terms of procedural guarantees for media for the treatment of their content online, to give it to all the media as long as they are and I'm talking here about this Article 17, so these privileges, as long as they are regulated or self-regulated by widely recognized system, such as press councils. In France, it's even, how to put it, more regulated, if you want, for the press. And they are independent, because of course this is now a very sensitive issue, independent from third countries. So they are not, to be blunt, funded by third countries that might, basically, use this media as propaganda tools. So these are not easy issues, and I'm pretty sure that there will be cases, that on the basis of this new law. What I can say is that this definition of media service provider is something that worked rather well so far for the audiovisual players, at least in the audiovisual media framework. Of course, it's fair to say that in the, let's say, newspaper, in the written text, it might become more complicated and more blurred, because of course we have many individual journalists working online, and their questions will arise. Still, we are trying to, to capture the media sector in its entirety. And I think this is also the right approach.
Yes, you said it all, but it's true that I think we also wanted to have a broad definition, also to be able to embed also national systems as well, because as you mentioned, and as also we discussed earlier, it's the first time that we are doing this Media Freedom Act. It's the first time that we are doing some legislation about the media in general. We had the audiovisual sector for years, but now it's much broader. So we thought that we would have this kind of broad definition, with indeed, when it comes to some specific articles, there a bit more details. And especially on Article 17, what was very important for us is that there we are precise, because here we come, and it's exactly what Anna explained about how we articulate the Media Freedom Act with other important initiatives, like the Digital Services Act, our Code of Practice Against Disinformation. So we need to ensure that all these initiatives that we have proposed in the European Commission work well together. And so this is why for this Article 17, we needed also to have additional requirements for the media who would have this privileged channel with online platforms. And it also relates to the fact that I think we were able to come with the Media Freedom Act today because of this digital developments that we see. So it's quite clear that now the Media Freedom Act, in a way, it was made even more urgent with digital developments, because it shows how information is like being accessed and being transmitted very quickly now and easily with digital means. But it also brings a lot of challenges in terms also of disinformation and also economic challenges, which Anna mentioned when talking about audience measurement. So I think that our general policy in the European Commission has been to try to increase the space online for information and decrease the space for disinformation. And so this is why we wanted to make sure with Article 17 that we propose it in a way that you don't allow some actors to claim their media while they are not doing information. And we know also it can evolve. I mean, in France, I think there was the case of François, which, you know, it's changed. So we have also, what we tried also to do with the Media Freedom Act is also to do some kind of legislation which can also cater for this kind of development. And we know that it's also now the media landscape is evolving quite quickly. And we know also we should not be naive that there are also like, I mean, foreign actors, I mean, Russian propaganda. We have all the case of Russia Today, which actually had a license in France, not in other EU member states. And this is why we also have now the cooperation between the regulators. So just to say that it is part, really, the Media Freedom Act is part also of our broader policy, which is about making, you know, because we consider, as you said very well, Julia, that information is a public good, which should be protected, which should have a dedicated law. And it is part of our broader approach to really have more information online and decrease and really fight disinformation. And for us, it's really two sides of the same coin.
Thank you very much. We will turn to the question. So we cannot activate the videos except for the panelists, but we can activate the mic. So we have the first question by Anthony Valion. So the question is on media bias and the fact that the US made mistakes when they allowed Fox to be set up in 1990s as Fox News, rather than say Fox Opinions, as the claim to be news suggests non-bias. Given risk of mis and disinformation, will these regulations help avoid Murdoch or Bannon setting up a new outlet as news rather than opinion or entertainment? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, do you want me to go first? Yes. So, I don't think that I don't think that this act will prevent, you know, or will in any way dictate to the member states, you know, how they should qualify certain media, you know, in terms of licensing them or, you know, allowing them to register and to function, you know, as it is now increasingly the case for on-demand services, no, because we have now a lot of media services operating simply through, you know, a registration system and not necessarily licensing. So I don't think that we will, you know, that goes. It would never be able. We would never be able at EU level, you know, to tell member states which media they should qualify, you know, how they should qualify the media. But I think what it would certainly do for the problem, if I understand correctly your question you're raising, is that through these provisions, through these duties that we are trying to put in place and the safeguards that we are also trying to put in place for journalists and basically all media professionals, you know, working in producing this public good, no, which is information, to put in place some sort of framework that is conducive, you know, to or leans naturally to more internal pluralism within the companies. And that was one of the main objectives of having these provisions obliging media service providers of news, so information media outlets, to have these measures to prevent interference in individual editorial decisions. That was the objective, to create tools within media companies to make sure that that there are these, if you want, what you call now online, natural like echo chambers, or or whatever you can call it, like the tendency to lean only to one opinion within a certain media outlet, and that that more voices are being heard, and certainly the owner, that's for sure, cannot dictate. Of course there is an editorial line of a media. We never wanted to crush the beauty of the European system, where of course we know that, especially in the newspaper landscape, we have media that are traditionally seen to represent certain political views, and we do not want to change that. And I think it would be also utopian to change this. I think we need media that represent the variety of political spectrum that we have, of views that we have in the society. But still, that the natural tendency within the media is to constantly question the line and how it is being proposed to the viewers, to the readers. So I think that this is hopefully this will be maybe not such a radical effect, but certainly something that can make a difference in practice. And by the way, an interesting thing on which we are extremely curious to have input from the researchers community is precisely what sort of tools. We have proposed a series of such tools, which was a survey of what we know already exists within media companies, can, if you want, foster this internal pluralism and editorial freedom within companies. And if there is anything that you can point us to, I think we would be extremely interested to know. Marie, I don't know if you want to add something.
I can maybe. Thank you very much. Also, it makes me think that we also see the Media Freedom Act, and I'm sorry, I always have the text with me. It's a bit weird. I mean, for my family and friends, it's getting a bit annoying. But so just to say that I think the text for us, we also see the article as tackling sometimes different issues which can solve different situations. It's very abstract. I will try to be more concrete. For example, I'm often asked as well about oligarchs. I mean, Vice-President Jourova is from Czech Republic, and there you even have a former prime minister who actually owned media. So as you can imagine, it also raised a lot of questions. So you mentioned, I mean, in France, we mentioned Bolloré, you mentioned also some Murdoch. I mean, in Central and Eastern Europe, we mentioned oligarchs. So there is this kind of issue. I think that we are not, and so the question was often, would you prevent a politician from buying a media? And our answer was no, we don't. With the act, we don't prevent anyone from buying a media. But what we are trying to do is to have as many safeguards as possible to prevent this, for example, politician to interfere in the line. And because we had a lot of discussions, because of course the media sector, they also need investment. So it's difficult to prevent some people to invest, but we said, okay, what we need is really like Chinese wall, or at least, to have safeguards to ensure that there is not this interference in the daily work of the journalist. And so this is why we have this Article 6, which first is mandating something which is extremely important, is the transparency of media ownership, because people should know who is behind, the content. And I think this can already help a lot. And second, we have these like this obligation, and believe me, we had a lot of discussions on this, but this obligation for media to take measures to guarantee the independence of individual editorial decisions. So they have basically to guarantee that editors are free to take individual editorial decisions in their professional activity, and also to disclose actual or potential conflict of interest, and by any party having a stake in the media and so on. So here I think we have a strong safeguard, and for us it's a very important first step. And of course, we had some publishers telling us, you are going too far, you are interfering with what we are doing, and so on. And well, we think that we came with this article, which is quite general. And then we have, next to that, we have recommendation with what we call internal safeguard, and with, as Anna mentioned, all these best practices. And also, once again, your work informed us in, you know, the model of foundation, or all these things. So we put all these things that the media could do to protect themselves against this potential interference, and to comply in a way with Article 6. So this is where we tried in a certain way to let's say make a step in the direction of this really encouraging the media to maybe, as you put it in your question, differentiate news and opinion, or this kind of things. We are really trying to come with these best practices in terms of protecting information. So this is our attempt. Some would say it's too little or too much, but at least it's our proposal, and so far it's still in the text, which we are very happy with. So that's maybe one thing, and maybe so Article 6 as a way to tackle this, and also, as Anna described, is all these rules now about the concentration. So if there is a merger, so if this, let's say, oligarch is buying a new media, what is the impact on media pluralism? And this, for the first time, we will have these the requirements to check this at national level, and if needed, if at European level. So for us, these are, I mean, important improvements. And it brings really this kind of minimum standard for the European Union, this kind of safety net for the European Union, which is quite unprecedented. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And in fact, it's a perfect transition with the next question we have on how to measure media pluralism. So it's a question by Charles Angelucci. Charles, if you want to phrase it directly.
Yes, thanks, Julia. Thank you very much for the super interesting presentation. I have a quick question about how to measure media pluralism, which obviously is an extremely complex issue. And I apologize if I should know the answer. I was wondering if you've kind of arrived at an approach that you think is reasonable, and or whether you think this is very much work in progress. And to add something to that, I would think that it might be relatively easy to say that, say, a merger might reduce pluralism, right? But I would think that the level of pluralism should also matter, in the sense that we might want to allow a merger in a high plurality environment, maybe for economic reasons, but we might want to block it in a low plurality environment. And so I think we cannot escape the burden of having to put a number or something on the level of media pluralism in a given market. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you very much. So indeed, this is a very complex question. I don't think that we have the answer today, to give you. But what we want to do, and what we have tried to achieve with this legislation, is to at least start discussing these issues at EU level, and possibly also come up with some guidelines. So what we have done, and this I mean for the assessment of media market concentrations, of course, as this first step, because you're talking about actual mergers being assessed, and that, of course, happens today only at national level. And we actually want that it happens now in all member states at national level. So what we do there, we are providing some pointers, if you want. So if you look at the provision, we are referring to certain, if you want, minimum criteria that have to be taken into account in such assessments. Obviously, we are talking about the impact of the concentration on pluralism, and in particular, the formation of public opinion. So here, you know, the relative power in directing, swaying opinions, you know, in a certain direction is the concept that I think is of a lot of interest. And of course, something a little more classical on the diversity of the actual players in the market, no, which is kind of the classical type of analysis. And there we are also, of course, referring to the online environment, because I think it is fair to say that, you know, the availability of online offers, you know, also changes, no, and should be taken into account in the assessment of media concentrations. Then we are coming to the issue that we just discussed. We also think that it's extremely important in those assessments to look at the actual safeguards that are being provided, no? Because you are now talking about, you know, allowing or not allowing the merger depending on how plural the market already is. But I think we have to also, on top, think whether post-merger, in terms of, you know, let's say we are, you know, we would be inclined to allow a merger because it's a high, you know, plurality environment, so there is no problem. Still, I think that there's an interest from the public policy perspective to make sure that in terms of informational output, post-merger, the internal pluralism will be there. So to give you an example, if there are, you know, I don't know, two major TV players now are merging in the market, and we still think, you know, this should go ahead, I think it is of an interest for policy makers and regulators to make sure that they don't, you know, propose homogeneous informational product, but propose some sort of, you know, in the competition language, it will be remedies to make sure that, for example, there will be separate, how you call it, rédaction, newsrooms, you know, dealing with, you know, so that they don't merge, you know, everything and propose the same informational product on all their channels. So this is the second type of issues that we think should be looked at. And then, of course, we are also looking at something that you are hinting at, you know, now in some of the environments, we see that increasingly media are struggling economically, no? So I think that we have to make sure that sometimes, you know, it's a survival. You know, I prefer, you know, at the very limit, somebody like Murdoch to buy, you know, all the local newspapers and save them, rather than let them die, you know, entirely. So this is the type of reasoning that the economic, you know, situation in which the media sector has to be part of the analysis. Last but not least, these are very difficult issues. So the short answer was we don't have, you know, a direct answer to your question, but we certainly think that these issues should be then further discussed at the European level, and we even had foreseen for ourselves a role to produce guidelines. And this is probably one of these areas where we would need the input from the researchers community. What sort of factors, what elements should be taken into account, and how we should maybe distinguish between these situations that you are hinting at. Last but not least, maybe, I'm sorry I'm a bit long, but these are very fascinating subjects. What we have also foreseen, and that might be extremely helpful in assessing what you are now suggesting, whether we are in a low or high plurality environment, is to have a good picture of the situation in the member states. And this is what we have been supporting at the EU level. Marie has already mentioned the Media Pluralism Monitor that has been a true success, if you want, of European public money well spent. and that has really informed the not only our rule of law work and continues to inform it, but also some responses that we have proposed here, and that we want to even strengthen now. So there is a specific provision in Article 25 of the Media Freedom Act where we foresee a sort of upgrade of the media pluralism monitor, with maybe an even stronger focus at the internal market issues, cross-border issues. And we certainly think that this is an extremely useful tool that can constantly evolve and become even better in the future, and possibly also include, more of economic aspects. So who knows, how the tool will evolve, and we certainly will do our best that it does. But importantly, now it has been foreseen, it has been mandated that we continue funding such independent monitoring of the media pluralism situation in all the European states or European Union member states. I don't know, Marie, if you want to add on this.
No,
I have become very excited about the subject.
No, but I am too. But I see also that there are many questions. So
I let you the next one. I let you the next one. Julia.
Yes, so we have like 2 more questions, which is perfect. For the sake of the consistency, I will first ask Maria Donde from Ofcom to ask her question, given this is linked to this issue of concentration, and then we will turn to Tamta.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. I'm so sorry. I'm also in a noisy place, but I will, given that you've given me the mic, thank you very much. Before I ask my question, if I could make just one very small addition to the previous discussion, actually, which is that we in Ofcom in the UK long ago developed a media pluralism measurement tool at the request of our government back in 2015, and last year we published an update to that of what we envisaged a better way of looking at media pluralism from a measurement perspective might be in the context of increased consumption of news online and in digital environment. And I'll drop a link to that document if I can in the chat, because I think that might be something that the previous questioner might be interested in taking a look at. I was interested in the powers of the board to advise on national concentration cases, and the fact that in the proposed Media Freedom Act, that's envisaged in a context where such cases may affect the functioning of the internal market. And I just wondered if you could both maybe say a little bit about what kind of cases that would be, and who would decide whether or not it met that test. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Maria. Julia, do we go ahead?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, so we have had, of course, a lot of discussions on this before, putting this legislation on the table. And I think the premise of this whole mechanism that we have put in place is that first and foremost, we want the media regulators discuss among themselves, because, we are, as you have seen, mandating that they are either those making such assessments at national level, or at least are involved in such assessment. And let's say the opinions of the board, the safety net, which I think you are referring to in Article 22, is a bit of a ultima ratio instrument when, something went wrong, so either there wasn't any assessment at national level. I have been alluding, I think, to the type of cases we have in mind, or for some reasons the media regulators, because of course they do enjoy again in this peer review system a great leeway to decide what they would then bring to the attention of their peers within the board. But for some reason, they decided not to do so. But there is a feeling within the board, and we have a lot of trust in the common wisdom of European media regulators, that a concentration has a fundamental impact on the functioning of the internal market. And we are giving, a few pointers to what we think, that such concentrations would be. And we don't necessarily mean only those that involve, of course, naturally, these would be those that involve players coming from two or more different member states, but also those that have such a substantial impact on the formation of public opinion in one member state, that that this could have spillover effects on the either neighboring countries or simply on people from that country living in other member states. So we have had we are giving the board, if you want, a lot of leeway. We are giving also very broad, pointers as to what could be considered to have this significant, would be likely to affect the functioning of the internal market. And that's, of course, why we want to have the board at the EU level, to look at the issues that are of European interest, of cross-border interest, and to also signal those issues to us, to the Commission, because they are the ones that are very close now to the media markets, and we think and we trust that they will know better what to look at.
If I just can ask like very small question before turning to the last question on that. How do you want to introduce some regulation, or how do you make sure that these regulators are completely independent from the government, which is a real issue in a number of countries?
Well, here we ask it in the Media Freedom Act. So basically, there is an article saying that the national media regulator, they have to be independent, and because this is a regulation, then it's directly applicable. And if the law is not respected, I mean, it might lead to infringement at EU level, which might mean Court of Justice sanctioned against the member state. And it's something we look at already, for example, in the telecom sector, because now, and Anna will correct me if I'm wrong, but we also have regulation now instead of previously a directive, right?
Well, it is no, it is state as a directive, but we do have also the audiovisual media, these independence requirements in the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. And now that most member states transpose the directive, of course, we will also not hesitate to use our competences to question that independence. And indeed, as Mary was saying, on the basis of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, but also directly also on the basis of the Media Freedom Act. So this is something that we will be, and we have already, sent the signals to the member states concerned in the regular rule of law exercise, where this issue of independence of media regulators is something extremely important.
So let's say we are basically strengthening the safeguards here for the independence of the national regulators, because indeed, as you say, that they are.
But I think also, Julia, if I'm interpreting you correctly, you are maybe hinting, or implying that you said it, some of these regulators might not necessarily be, trusted partners. And there I can bring maybe just a little bit of experience from the current framework, so ERGA, the current network of media regulators, where we have seen an incredible force of peer pressure. So, when the regulators operate at national level, many things can happen, and indeed do happen in terms of being, dependent. But when they act at the European level, we have noted that there is, how should I put it, since most of the regulators still in Europe, I think we can consider them to be very independent. There is this spillover effect, if you want, and peer pressure. And we have also seen cases where certain decisions that were taken for political reasons by regulators were revoked also because of the peer pressure within the board, so because of the letters that were sent by the chair of the board, the current ERGA, so the current network of regulators. So I think that we have a lot of, this is also why we want to reinforce this body at EU level, because we think that this can be also extremely beneficial in a more, so you have the, how should I put it, the coercive measures in terms of infringement, but you also have this positive spillover effects that you have when you create European networks.
So thanks a lot. And so I will turn to the last questions by Tamta Muradashvili.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Thank you so much for this webinar. I'm very glad that I found you. My question, well, I'm from Georgia. I'm from Tavari channel, which is an oppressed TV channel in Georgia. Currently, I'm in the United States. I'm a Fulbright scholar and doing my research on media freedom. And my question is, since Georgia has signed association agreement and it's part of Eastern Partnership, is EU going to apply the same standards to Eastern Partnership countries? And will Georgia have a liability to harmonize the new directives? Well, this comes from, of course, it's good. I know the intention of EU, but unfortunately, since we are oligarchy country and media pluralism was one of the issues outlined in 12 recommendations defined for Georgia by EU, and our regulatory body, GNCC, General National Communications Commission, was also highlighted in negative role in many EU documents and US State Department reports, because it's a very effective tool body to suppress media. And the tendency is that every suppression action is blamed on EU. So considering and hearing the news, for example, on audience measurement, which was actually one of the attempts of Georgian regulator to interfere in our editorial independence to influence people, that kind of alarmed me, because if today, for example, GNCC is hearing this news, they're gonna implement that tomorrow. So are there any considerations from EU side, like the context of each country? Because we have liability of de-oligarchization. That means that we have problems regarding democracy, and we're a state-captured country according to Transparency International. So is EU willing to consider the context of each country while applying the same rules and during the harmonization process? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So it's interesting because I think it was only this morning that, or even just before the meeting, that I have seen some exchanges on the, I think, independence of the regulator in Georgia. So it's interesting that you're asking this question. So that just shows you that we are, of course, actively working on this. And as you know very well, you seem to know very well the enlargement process. The precondition to join the EU is, of course, the alignment with the framework we have, with the legal framework we have. It's, of course, a gradual process. And, you ask about the context. The EU legal framework already applies in very different, contexts of EU members nowadays. So obviously the context is always taken into account. But if you want, the law is law, and as long as the standards, not the minimal standards that we have in the EU legislation, so independence of, there are certain things that are, have to be in hard law, no? So the requirements for independence of media regulators have to be simply there, no? When the Media Freedom Act becomes law, the same will be true for other obligations, like, for example, media ownership transparency. So there will have to be rules in Georgian law on media ownership transparency, and so on and so forth. So this is the how should I put it? The context is taken into account, throughout the enlargement process. But of course, as from the moment of accession, you have to be compliant with the laws, and if you are not, then of course there can be always infringement procedures. But the whole idea of the enlargement process is that when you arrive, you are ready. And I think, I have followed, of course, very closely. I was very young at the time, but still I have followed this already, as a young employee, first student and employee of the European institutions, because I joined I joined just before the time of accession of my own country. And I've looked, of course, you know, there were, of course, very different countries, you know, that were part of that batch, you know, they were very, very different. So, and look where we are today, you know, of course, there are issues, there are problems. There were some countries that, you know, required some special attention, and they still require special attention. You know, some of these, you know, some of the old countries are also creating new problems are appearing. So I think that especially as regards, you know, all these media pluralism and freedom issues, I think it is a phrase that was coined by the Media Pluralism Monitor. So I take no copyright for it, but I think no country, no, is free from risk, is immune to risk, is immune to risk. Thank you, Marie. And I think that this is the idea. I think what we have to do is a framework in place that prevents the risks, no? But we will never eliminate them. No, this is not an area. It is not. It's very different from, I don't know, laws on I don't know, safety of pharmaceuticals, no, that are much easier, how should I put it, no, to enforce and see that they are working in practice. Now here we are, of course, talking about a multifaceted phenomenon that is very difficult, and there are some, you know, requirements that can be measured, but not everything, no, can be measured.
No, indeed, and just to, I mean, recently we have also discussed a lot also the media law in Ukraine and how it was how the Audiovisual Media Services Directive was integrated by Ukraine, and we had discussions about the Media Freedom Act, but it's not yet acquis in our legislative acquis. So I hope it will be soon the case. But indeed, it's part of the process that in terms of enlargement countries that they integrate EU legislation. But beyond that, I think that what we try to do in the European Union, and it's something we have done, for example, when it comes to the protection of personal data or the Digital Services Act, and today the Media Freedom Act, is that we really want to be seen as leading when it comes to the protection of fundamental rights. And here we saw a need in terms of media freedom and pluralism, and so we did our best to come with some legislation, and to we feel it's very important to put our house into order if we want to be also credible on the global stage. And so for us, it will be very important to have this Media Freedom Act also in our relationship with our neighboring countries, and also other big players worldwide, and if I may even push the ambition a bit further, because you made me think about another important project for Vera Jourova, for Vice President, is also to see the European Union as a safe harbor, or a place where we could be a media freedom hub. And this is why also now we also try to help Russian independent media, because they cannot do their work in Russia anymore because of censorship. So we try to support their work now in the European Union. So it's part of our, let's say, broader political objective to really try to protect media freedom. And also what we have seen is that it's not always something about old democracies and new democracy. I think that there are challenges everywhere, and that what we really what we really want now with the Media Freedom Act is to have this safety net, this minimum standard, but we will always push all our member states to go further and to be top of the league. And what we think is very important with the Act as well is that I think we put this issue higher on the agenda. It's also something now we discuss a lot with the US, because there is this democracy summit, and also I think because of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, I think there is a wider discussion about what are our values, our rights, our model, and what do we defend. And for this, really, we need to put our house into order and really have strong laws and then implement it. And I would like really to thank you again, because now it's high on the political agenda and we are talking about it, but you have been working on this for decades. And sometimes, unfortunately, is what is happening in politics is that you need some crisis to come with something. And I think that in a way we saw with COVID, with the war, with really bad situation in some of our member states, which was unfortunately like spilling over. We said, okay, then we have to act. Now we were against the wall, and I think it's how do you say, five before midnight, or
yeah.
So it's really time for us to act. And today we are basically using the work you have done for decades. So thank you again for that.
But thanks a lot to both Marie and Anna for like your presentation, like your like very precise answers to all the questions. I think we will have like a lot of like additional questions in the future, but it was really fascinating for this like 1 hour and a half. I would like also to thanks Elise Chrétien and Philippe Lauritsen who helped me organizing this meeting. And I guess without them, I will still try to understand how Zoom is working. So now, thank you very much for your help with all this RPN Media Plurality network. So the next webinar will take place on Thursday, November 16. It will be from like 6 to 7:30 Paris time. Of course, you will receive an email with more information, and we will discuss media plurality and the fight against misinformation online. This is jointly organized with the Stigler Center at the University of Chicago, and we are really looking forward to it. So thanks to all of you for like attending this webinar. We recorded it as usual, so if you are not able to attend, you can still watch it online, and I hope we will continue Marie and Anna's discussion in the future. So thank you very much.